And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution is not going to get that man today. No, because I'm going to get him.
We are back, Coast to Coast AM, and I am really excited because one of the things I'm passionate about is talking about our undiscovered potential and getting people to think differently. You know, the mind is capable of many different states of consciousness. Only some of them are acceptable to the Western world, ones that have to do with consumerism, consumption, things like that. But we're capable of so much more, and that's why our next guest, I think, is someone who has done quite a bit to push people out of the box. J.Z. Knight and her students were responsible for making the very successful film called What the Bleep Do We Know? And in it, they explore the idea that thoughts are actual things and that we get addicted to this emotional state, whether it's love or lust or hatred, these emotional states that many people have every single day and many times a day produce a reaction, a physiological response that releases chemicals that we end up getting addicted to. So we start to go out of our way to feel these different emotions because the things that happen in our body that coincide with these emotions create some sort of addiction to it. And it goes way beyond that. I mean, it really talks about how our thoughts can really interact with matter and energy and that we can alter the things around us, the things within inside us. So it was one thing that really shifted people's ideas about what was possible. And from there, a whole universe of conscious media has opened up. The Secret, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, on and on and on. So we're going to talk about this and much more with J.Z. Knight right after the break. Stay there. Welcome back to Coast AM. We're talking with J.Z. Knight, someone who's not been on this program in about 6-7 years. And she is someone who delivers a message from an enlightened teacher, Ramtha, who lived about 35,000 years ago, was a warrior king in the ancient and lost continent of Lemuria. We're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about some of the prophetic messages that have been coming through since she was last on, and her very large body of work that inspires so many people. And J.Z. Knight, welcome back.
It is my pleasure to be back, and a big shout-out to you, Rob, your audience, and all the lovely people in Yelm, Washington, and around the world that are tuning in tonight. Good morning and good evening.
Well, good morning, yeah, wherever you may be in your time zone. Now, J.Z., you're someone who really has stood the test of time. You've taken all the slings and arrows that outrageous fortune has delivered. You know, this word channel and what you do is really controversial. Has any of this controversial gotten to you? Is it something that you live with on a daily basis?
That's a great question. Any time that we venture out of the box that we live in as a society, anytime we do that, the thought police and the incredulous people want to put us back in and in a way hamper our innate discoveries of our mind, our capabilities, who we are. You know, I was telling you earlier that I tell people when I speak to people around the world that the greatest mystery in the world is you. Most people do not know who they are, why they are, what they're capable of doing. And when a person seeks spiritual understanding, they're innately seeking to understand themselves and their relationship to God or the universe or the meaning of life, whatever it is. But it's the greatest journey that we can possibly take. So in this extraordinary and outrageous incident that happened in my life, it has brought a lot of unkind things out in people not liking the possibility of these possibilities. But at the same time, it would be one thing that if this was some sort of psychosis that I had suffered from for 36 years, you could get over that in a hurry when people don't like you. On the other hand, when you see what you see, hear what you hear, go through what you go through, and those experiences are replicatable, after a while, you just begin to understand that this is your truth, and other people have their truth. And it's a long experience to allow people their opinion instead of wanting to convince them.
Okay, well,
I got over that a long time ago.
Yeah, let's give people a thumbnail, because you had quite a normal life. It'd be funny enough, you happened to have been born in Roswell, New Mexico.
Yes, in 1946, and the UFO crashed in 47.
Right. And so when did your life take this dramatic turn? I understand that a psychic told you something that was quite prophetic.
When I was in California, I was working with CATV Communications, which was wiring the country for cable TV overhead and underground systems. And I just happened to pass with my friend one day, and we went into this palm reader, and we'd always seen this shop, and I'd never been to a palm reader before. And this person predicted that I would make the move that I eventually made, and that I would have two choices and where I should go, which is what I subsequently did, and that I would meet the one. And, you know, as a woman, we always think, oh, that's got to be Mr. Wonderful. And all of those events unfolded, and all those things came to pass in my life. But, you know, I think my blessed part of my life was because I was born so poor, and my mother picked cotton, and we lived in a shack, and we didn't have, in those days, medical care or health insurance. I mean, these are field workers. They didn't have anything like that. And sort of the outcropping of that was to be able to use your mind to heal your body or to foretell dreams. And so was sort of brought up by a very intuitive mother that without all the resources that we have today and that we argue over, my mother actually used her mind in a way to heal, to get information like don't go to school today because I don't want you crossing the bottoms over to the school bus, that sort of thing. And so I sort of grew up and already had experience as a child in the cotton fields of Rockwall, Texas.
Was your mother superstitious?
No, my mother wasn't superstitious. Having the ability to know is different than a person who doesn't know who thinks that someone who does is superstitious. She
was intuitive.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
as we all are.
So you heard this prediction from the psychic, and then what happened?
I had voices that started to talk to me when I was in the fields, and I was only 3 years old. But I always had this lovely voice and these lovely beings that always talked to me. And I would tell my mother, and she'd just pat me and say, "That's right, darling, that's right, darling." And so I sort of grew up seeing things that other people didn't see, and came to the harsh reality that people didn't see what I saw. And so I was never told at home that I was crazy or that I had my special little made-up friend in my life. I was never told anything like that. I realized that I didn't know how, but I just saw things and knew things that seemingly other people around me could know but were afraid to know.
Okay.
And that was my life.
All right. And how did the Ramtha first come to you?
Ramtha, this is a story that has been retread so many times. I've told it so many times. In my book, A State of Mind, it really goes into detail about how this happened.
Well, give us the thumbnail.
The thumbnail was working in Tacoma, Washington, getting ready to marry my dentist husband. And we hike because you live in Washington State. People go hiking in the mountains, and so we were hikers and backpackers, and and this book came out called Pyramid Power. I don't know if you recall it, but Pyramid Power was that this whole idea that if you put something under it, it would turn milk into yogurt, and it would do all these amazing things. And so we got this great idea to let's make some to scale, align them at true north, and then we'll just put all these little things underneath them. And we just started on a Friday night and sent the children out the next day and pulled down the blinds, and we worked all day making these modular pyramids. And we put all sorts of things under it. And because my husband was a scientist, he had a scientific mind, we had a very, very detailed list of what we had and how they were progressing. And we did this night and day. And on Sunday afternoon, there were pyramids on top of my stove, on my oven door, all down the hall. They were everywhere.
Right.
I just started laughing. I was laughing so hard it was stupid because I felt giddy from no sleep and doing this sort of macabre thing. And at 2:30 in the afternoon, that's where this thing appeared in my kitchen. And my husband had this compass on the table because we had to line these pyramids in a certain direction and had to be very precise. And this compass just went whining. It sounded like an airplane propeller. And this being manifested in my kitchen, and a lot of his body went up into the ceiling, so he was transparent, but then he wasn't. Very hard to explain. And you don't want to or necessarily think you'll see anything like this in the afternoon, but this is what happened, and that was the first appearance of a being who called himself Ramtha, and he appeared 3 times that day. I was too in shock to be frightened, and he gave a prophecy. The prophecy came to pass. He told us what to do. We did exactly that, and that began this tremendous legacy from February 1977.
And you both saw this entity, you and your partner.
My husband did not see Ramtha.
Oh.
What he saw were lights, and he couldn't figure out what was wrong with the compass.
Interesting. So what was the prophecy that he said?
That we had to leave the house we were at, that we were in danger within 2 days, and that we had to be out of there. And we left, obviously, and came back on 2.5 days later, and it had been broken into. And my children, ironically, that night had a dream about it. Were very upset, and that sort of sealed the deal. And they were out. They weren't even in the house during this particular time. So when my children had this nightmare of these people, they called them hippies, breaking into the house and killing my little brother and hurting my mom, and that really terrified me. And so that was sort of the impetus to get up and go and do something that something had interfered or intervened, some guardian angel or whatever you want to call it, had done for us. And that was the beginning of the saga of Ramtha in my life.
Well, was your husband okay with this, that you were, first of all, listening to this apparition, I'm sure?
Well, he could also see things. So
okay.
He didn't see him. He saw lights. He saw the phenomenon, and he absolutely loved it. He loved Ramtha. The Ram said so many wonderful things that were going to happen that he wrote down. We did it. We did all these things and absolutely got at peace with it.
Now, it must have been hard to tell people about this in the beginning, and if you did, what did they say?
It was hard because I'm a dentist's wife. I go to luncheons and to dinners, and we have our friends that we camp with, we hunt with, we have dinner with, and I'm a homeroom mother, and, I'm carting kids back and forth to games. And, I wasn't into any of this, meaning I didn't even know who Edgar Casey was, for God's sakes. I didn't know anything about the spiritualist, New Age, any of that stuff. hadn't studied any of that. And so when all of this happened to me, I mean, it's rather a long story, but what became really convincing about this being is the day that he pulled me out of my body. And when he pulled me out of my body, he wanted to show me a realm that I would know things in that was different than the one I was in. And I was terrified it was going to die, and my kids would come home and find their mother dead, and dinner wouldn't be made, and, I mean, all these sorts of things. What really, really turned me around was the day he took me out of my body, and that was an extraordinary day.
Well, where did he take you?
Well, first off, he taught me how to do this, and I couldn't do it. I was too scared, and so he reached, I know this sounds strange, he reached in the top of my head and pulled me out. Now, Ramtha is huge. This is like over 7 feet tall. He pulled me out, and I floated. I mean, like I was a helium balloon.
Like your astral body he pulled out. Is that what they call it?
Pulled me out
of
my body. Me that is inside of this body, that's inside of this brain. He pulled me out of my body, and my awareness, you can call it your higher self, your greater self. I call it yourself. I floated up to the ceiling and became aware that I was looking at something, and I couldn't make out what it was, and I realized it was a cobweb. And I'm an immaculate housekeeper, that I had missed this cobweb. This was so bizarre. I'm looking at this cobweb going, how could I have missed this cobweb? And then it's like I turned, but I didn't. And I looked, and I saw him standing in a whole different light, and I saw my body from up above, sitting in the chair, and my ratted hairdo on top. And he pointed his finger. When he pointed his finger, I moved across the room. I went in through a wall that went into our study. I went up the roof and back down. And in a moment, I was back in my body. Now, that went on for every day. And I told my husband about this entire process when he got home from work. I mean, I didn't even know how to talk cogently because of what I experienced. But the third time Ramtha took me out, he pulled on me. I went out on my own, moved up to the ceiling, looked down, and this huge tunnel that, if you could imagine a tornado laying on its side or a wormhole just opened up in my viewing room. Like it took up the whole wall. And this thing was moving. It was like it was moving around, and this light was coming out of it. And the Ram was standing just outside of that tunnel, and he pointed at me, and I went right into this thing. And I knew, I don't know how I knew at that time, but I already knew what this was.
What was it?
It was the tunnel that connects beyond the light.
Well, right there, you must have been thinking to yourself, is this a nervous breakdown? Is this a brain tumor? Or am I being subjected to some sort of demonic possession?
Oh, my God, no. I didn't think any of those things, because when you have a near-death experience, you don't think that at all. It's very beautiful where you're at, and you do not think in those terms. Where you're at is more familiar to you than the body. You talk to your body. You talk about the bodies if it's another person. You're more at home there than you are here. And the problem was coming back to my body and wrestling with the heaviness of my body. And I was a young woman in those days. The slowness of walking, going up and down stairs, all of those things, the memory of freedom, of what it was to be bathed in love and in light, was the most extraordinary experience, and it became a place that I longed to go to. I didn't enjoy coming back to my body because sometimes it was like being pushed through. It was like you being pushed through a screen door, and you come back, and you're suddenly in your brain again, and your gravity and density, all these things.
Yeah, it sounds like a near-death experience. People.
Well, that's what it was,
yeah.
And that's what I have been saying since 1977, 78, and on, because I didn't know. I knew that this is how people who had passed on, where they went.
And this is what they describe when they come back, if they come back. Absolutely. Well, hold it right there. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the information that has come through and what people are saying about it. This is Coast to Coast AM. I'm Rob Simone. We are back talking about one of the most widely recognized and famous channels of an entity called Ramtha, J.Z. Knight, and she's built a whole school about all the teachings that have come through. And so we get more of a snapshot of her life before Ramtha and how it has affected her and the people who have been looking and studying and poring over the things that come out of the mouth of this Ramtha. Because some of it is understandable. Some of it has to do with quantum physics. Some of it is quite controversial. We're going to talk about all of that right after the break. Stay there. We are back on Coast to Coast AM talking with J.Z. Knight. And, J.Z., right before the break, we gave people sort of an idea about your life before Ramtha came in and then after. And you seem to take it all in stride. I mean, what you're telling, talking about your experiences would send most people to the loony bin. Do you think you were chosen for a reason? Do you think you had a pre-existing way about you that made you the perfect person for this channeling experience?
Oh, just so kind, Rob. Yes, I think that I had an option to choose this destiny. I didn't know that for a very, very long time. I would find that out, I don't know, 5 or 6 years into Ramtha being here, because it did occur to me one day to ask me, why don't you just do this? You don't need me. You can do this, da-da-da. And I found out, yes, I had a choice to, and of course, you have to subscribe to the concept of reincarnation to give this any credibility, but there is reincarnation. We all have lived many lives and will live many, many more. And in that, we always have a choice. It is free will. We are predestined to come into matter, to evolve matter.
Okay, well, who were you in a past life that led you into this life?
I was in Ramtha's lifetime.
Okay.
And then I had subsequent lifetimes after that, being a part of that particular time. And so I had an opportunity to come and do this work. And it hasn't been an easy task to do, certainly, but it's something that after 36 years, I love what I do. I love people. I love what people are. I love the mystery that we all are and what potentials lie within all of us.
Well, your past lives, were you anybody that we would know? Any household names?
Oh, yes, but I don't think that's really relevant right now.
Really?
I think what's really relevant,
Well, now I'm curious. Now I have to ask.
No.
Now,
we're only as great as our current lifetime.
So you'd rather not say who you were?
Would rather not say.
Because that leads me to think it's somebody big or someone who had a big presence in history. I
had a small presence in history. I think we all have from time to time.
Yeah.
But what's happening to me now happened to me a long time ago, and I was sort of burned for it. And it's a risky thing. Once we get locked into our brain and we get addicted to our chemical reality, we do all live in a state of denial to some degree, and it is at once dangerous and tormenting for us.
What do you mean you got burned? What do you mean?
Well, I I was burned at the stake for hearing voices.
Oh, in another life?
Yes.
Ah, in Salem?
No.
Okay.
Oh, no. In France.
Oh, I see.
But anyway, so I always say you're only as great as your current life. And that's actually true to form, because all of the other existence we've had have been existences to have an opportunity to make known and unknown. In other words, to expand our life, to expand our knowledge, to make known ideas that are not in time yet. And that's really at the bottom line of the reason that we are here. It sounds rather drab and unglamorous, but if we think about that, we're here all to be geniuses, that we're all here to think outside of the box and to bring concepts that haven't been thought before into our own life, that we actually must have the tools to be able to make those things matter in our life. So to me, it's been an extraordinary journey. And
well, let me ask you about the beginning part of the journey. When in the first few years when Rantha was coming out, what kind of things was he talking about?
What kind of things? The most important teachings that he gave, first off, I didn't know what mediums were, and I had finally, and he had sent me to the bookstore, all these little lights would flare over all of these books, and he told me to read, and most of the books I bought, I didn't even know what I was buying, and so it was sort of directed to all of these books, and sometimes when they were excited about me being on a certain page, there'd be so many lights on it, I was swiping them away.
So he was sort of giving you a book list. You were in your own private book club, the Rantha Book Club.
I was in my own book club, which was embarrassing, the amount of books that I ended up buying. But what was really important is I was getting an education to ask a greater question, to understand things that, my goodness, that we all have access to libraries around the world and bookstores, but we rarely ever use. So my book list was not novel at all. It was very unique. And so, long story short, his teachings were in introduction that everyone was divine, that they were, we would like to call them in times past, gods, that everyone is a divine being, all 7 billion of us, and that because we are divine, this is the reason for our life, and that our life matters, and it's important who we are. And he began those teachings, and then he would teach people remarkable things about themselves, and he had the power to send runners. He made things happen for people, and his
does that include healing as well?
Yes. The important element, though, I asked him one day when I had read Thomas Sturge's book, There Is a River, about Edgar Cayce. I was getting familiar with Edgar Cayce, and I was all jazzed, and I said, so this is what I am. I'm a sleeping medium. And he said, well, are you asleep? And I said, well, no. And I asked him if I was psychic, if I was a medium. These are all new terms for me. And he said I was a channel. And so once he explained that to me, basically leaving my body, the ram's not in my body. He's using the brain. He's not in it. He's manipulating my body like a puppet, and using the brain and using my brain, as it were. And so when people would start, as his fame grew, we never advertised, just grew by word of mouth. They would say, well, you're a medium. And I said, no, I'm a channel. I'm actually going to leave my body. And nobody kind of understood that. But Rantha in the 80s really created the term channeling that is so much a part of our lexicon today, that's used every day on news shows, for example, to really determine what was really different about what was going on here. And so that stuck. What happened with his teachings when he were beginning to take people out of New Age concepts and Old Age concepts and superstition and all those sorts of things were to then declare that we were divine and then go about showing us how we were and why we were. And then this long, methodical teaching through the 80s of how to create reality and do marvelous things, and that's what he started doing.
I see. Well, what is it about the word channeling that people have this knee-jerk reaction to? You get a lot of criticism from people who just think that it's not possible and you're making it all up, or it's coming from maybe some sort of fractured personality. Right.
Well, I think all of those people have justifications for thinking all those things. I mean, if you're not understanding or have the knowledge of how this is possible, I mean, it would seem impossible and rather foolish to say something like that and then expose yourself to harsh criticisms. But it is true. It is true that this possibility exists. And I think channeling got a very bad eye. You know, the 80s, I loved the 80s because everyone came out of their spiritual closet. They all began to talk about, you know, near-death experiences. They talked about, you know, out-of-body experiences. People were very free in talking about their experiences they've had. They've always been afraid to speak about. And then the thought police get in and the religion gets in, and then, you know, the door slams shut because then they make it to be a bad thing. And it's sort of like ruling people through intimidation. And you know, before the end of the decade, you know, anybody that was a medium or a psychic now had turned into a channel, and, you know, they were channeling, you know, porpoises and whales and, you know, ancient medicine doctors, and, you know, and in one way, it sort of became a circus in that, and that was just fuel for a great deal of criticism. But when we look at ancient prophets, all through biblical texts and other ancient texts, there were always beings that spoke for the Lord, or they spoke for an angel, or they were there to deliver a message, or they had a light around them, and that light did marvelous things. And those are sort of numerous throughout the ancient world, and are still numerous today, except that in our society, so geared to materialistic here and now, and enclosed with, you know, religion, people are really afraid to go out of the box and begin to explain these abnormal occurrences that they've had happen to them. But, you know, when they're ready, they'll begin to seek out and find answers as why these marvelous things have happened to them, or frightful things have happened to them, and that'll begin the quest of understanding a bit more who they are in this universe.
Well, it's one thing to say that, to declare you are the channel for a 35,000-year-old warrior king, and I know there's probably a responsibility that you would assume in doing this because you feel as though the information is extremely important. But I wonder, have you ever done anything in your personal life or your professional life to draw more criticism to yourself?
Oh, well, I think everybody has. I mean, everybody's going to criticize you even if you wear your hair wrong. I think that's just a part of life.
So you feel as though...
I don't think anybody passes the perfect test. I mean, we're not really here to be perfect. We're really here to experience life and learn about life, that we gain wisdom. And by wisdom, we begin to understand larger and larger groups of people to whom we otherwise would have been alienated from and maybe judged harshly.
So you feel as though there is a responsibility that is more for you than the average person, because obviously this knowledge is something for the world, right? Is that something you feel you have to pass on?
I feel those ideas that I had naively in the beginning were soon crushed, and I realized that, you know, a lot of people don't want to hear anything about this. And yet I just thought it was the most marvelous thing, and gee, you should see where I go, and and I know you'll remember when you were there and all of this. It really is only for those people that have a desire to learn from something out of the box that works. You came to this school and you witnessed an event of advancing people in this school to some pretty marvelous things. It just wasn't about philosophy. It was the focus on a person taking this and experiencing it and proving to themselves that they have these possibilities within them. We're not a religious organization. We do not go out and proselytize to people. We don't go out and say you have to belong to this organization or that. We're simply a school that this is the teacher, because if you can get past all of this and come and learn about you, then this is where you'll be to learn that knowledge, and it'll be sincere. It's not for everyone. I mean, I don't think, everyone could do really well to learn how really wonderful they really are, juxtaposed against the world and all of its problems and our struggling within it. It's really wonderful, but not everyone is ready to know that.
You talked a little bit before about the early days in the 80s. There was healing going on. Tell me a little bit about some of the healing that's come through, because I wasn't aware of that.
Well,
I mean, physical ailments and diseases, is that what we're talking about?
Yes. Well, there's people come and have had those, and Ramtha has. Not everyone that has come to see him walked away healed. There are many who did. I experienced that in my own family, some really remarkable healings that even opened up my own sphere to that possibility. My son, Brandy, in the 6th grade, was allergic to everything but water. And if he ate anything, exposed himself to anything, his face would blow up, his hands would swell up. And he came home one day at lunchtime with a friend, and he was screaming and crying, and he was blown up like a balloon. And I immediately went to call the doctor and rush him to emergency room. And Ramtha was there and said, we can take care of this in a moment. And in fact, as a mother, knowing the consequences of delay, I had to look at the RAM and in a moment make a decision that I wanted, okay, let's do this thing. And so he just asked me to set Brandy by the bed. I said, the RAM is here. Give me your hands, close your eyes, and repeat these words. And I don't even remember the words. It's what Ramtha said. And I said them, and my son said them. And I'm telling you, Rob, not even a minute. I took my hands off, and we opened our eyes, and my son's face and hands were absolutely normal within a moment. And his friend, who had come with him, said, cool, how did you do that? And Brandy ran to the mirror and started jumping on the bed, and I was flabbergasted. I mean, I didn't even say thank you. I didn't even know what to say. I mean, I had witnessed this within an instant. So I took Brandy to his medical doctor, where his allergies specialist, and they retested him. He wasn't allergic to anything, and they don't know what had caused that to change. Now, that was with my son, and then my younger son, we had the same situation occur with him. And I think it was very important for me to understand, in something so intimate and so near and dear to me, to have the faith to believe that something was wonderful. And I think it was the test. And my children to this day will tell you that story. So those are things that happened. Now, transferred to audiences, I don't know, because I'm not at those audiences. I am gone. But I know there have been people who had remarkable experiences, and I know there are people who have had no experience at all. And I think that the key here was the relevance of allowing yourself to give it up and allow something greater to work in you. And there are those of us who are afraid, there are those of us who are insecure, and there are those of us who have lived with our illness for so long, we're afraid it will fail at it. And so these are things that have happened throughout the years.
Yeah, well, 1 billion people believe in the power of prayer. Is this another form of non-local healing?
Well, look, you can call it prayer. You can call it anything you want to. But I firmly knew that with the Ram standing there in that room, when my son came in with this problem, that my tendency was not to sit and pray for him because he was too severe. My tendency was to call the doctor and take him to emergency room. Right then and there, I know that Ramtha knew this little boy would follow commands. And what Ramtha said to him that I repeated, didn't make any difference I repeated. It's what my son said that immediately released it. I mean, in a moment. It's like an alternative reality took place right then and there. So I absolutely ascribe to it. What is really important is that we can't just mumble prayers. We can't just mumble mantras. We can't just keep saying things over and over and over. The key is to be absolutely present with what we say. And being present is focus. And that focus is what changes everything. That determines how our mind will be and how our body will follow.
Well, there is a lot more I want to get to with J.Z. Knight, and we'll talk about more of what has come through Ramtha. That includes politics, political prognostications that have come true, according to Jay-Z, gold, sunspots, earthquakes, and 2012. I'm Rob Simone. You're listening to Coast AM. We are talking about the mind. We're talking about channeled information that has come through J.Z. Knight, Ramtha. And she has been doing it for over 30 years now. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the predictions about earth changes and even in politics that Ramtha has come down on. And we're going to find out about the accuracy of that and a little bit about what the bleep do we know, because that was really a phenomenon that is worth mentioning because her students were really the driving force to make that film a reality. So stay tuned. We're going to get into all of this and a lot more right after the break. We're back on Coast to Coast AM talking with J.Z. Knight about the teachings of Ramtha. And J.Z., I just wanted to get into these earth changes because that's something that people are really interested. But first, this whole thing about channeling it is polarizing, and I know it divides people, but, it's worth pointing out that you don't spend your time on a beach in Tahiti. You're not in some penthouse. You really are working all the time. You're up there on stages around the world, and you're passionate about reaching out to people and improving people's lives. I mean, if anyone looks at what you do, they'd have to come away with that opinion first and foremost, right?
Thank you. That's true. I am passionate about my blessed life, and I've been doing this for 36 years. I'm passionate about the lives that the Ram has changed and its effect on the world. And I am very proud of my work. I'm very proud and I'm very passionate about it. If only people knew how wonderful they really were and what possibilities they actually possessed innately within them. I mean, once they get awakened to that possibility, very few people go back to their past. They don't relive their past every day. They start creating the future. Like tomorrow morning's brand new. We're going to live it, the way that we lived today and yesterday. Are we going to make up our mind to start to think differently, that thoughts matter, that create the reality to bring something brand new into our life? Everything is possible to us if only we know that and allow ourselves to experience it.
That's well said. And when we talk about channeling, it's a word that a lot of people wouldn't normally understand that they already believe in. In other words, the New Testament, written in a large part by Paul, but he never met Jesus. He just appeared to him one day on the road to Damascus, right?
Yes, that's true.
So in a sense, what we have here is sort of a tried and true way of getting important information out to people that is a little extraordinary.
I tell you what, Rob, if everyone knew that they could actually channel their own futures. For example, if everyone knew that they could channel their greater good, I mean, we have that opportunity every day, every moment of our life available. In essence, all that Ramtha represents in using a female body and a male expression is that there is this God intelligence in all of us, in every single one of us. If we decided tomorrow morning to wake up and stop being depressed and stop living in the box and said, this day, I will never live like I have lived before, and we begin to channel new thoughts that come in from a real high level of consciousness. Consciousness is a stream of programming that our brain, like a computer, is actually wired to use. We just click it on, and it starts to flow out of us. It really represents the greatness in all of us. And we wouldn't have to be afraid of tomorrow. We would have access to tomorrow. We would have access in how we want to set our day and how we want to recreate and, if you will, be reincarnated in the same life you're in right now, but instead of living it from every day of your life from the past, which makes us old, and begin to live it like brand new. You know, just say, way I think sucks. You know, I'm going to write down what it is I want to experience today, how it is that I am about that experience, and allow the experience to happen. It will bring to you new emotions. We can't feel the future because we've not experienced it. It's only when we create something that we've then experienced it do we get those feelings from. And we've sort of been led around by our emotions instead of our potentials. And so what we're learning is that if you live your future on the sum total of how you feel, then you are reliving your past. So you get old and you die of disease. If you begin to say, this day, I have always been young, I have always been radiantly healthy, I have always been a genius, I will know all the answers to these things, and you hold tight to that, you are creating a brand new day that is not feeling, but it's determination. We are creating thoughts that will manifest, that we will then get the emotional high from experience. And now we're really starting to live. And that's what the RAM teaches, and that's what's being taught at the school.
Well, let me ask you about the emotional high, because this is something that was brought out wonderfully in What the Bleep Do We Know. It was a very successful film. Now, some people might not be familiar with it. It came out a while back. Give people the headlines from What the Bleep if they haven't seen it.
Was created by a friend of mine and a real genius in the school, Mr. Will Arts, and his desire had always been to make a movie. I mean, he was a brilliant software creator, and so he did the work in the school, and in the school we really are taught that let's create something new in our life. And so he went through the discipline, the process, and within 20 minutes got his card. And then the opportunity opened up within 2 weeks. He got all the money he needed. And then he started this film, and he started writing a film that would, in a sense, really unfold to people what he had learned in the school for 16 years. And the film had to be entertaining. It had to show our potentials. It had to show our lacks, plus our victories. And so he and his team went to work with students that were in the school at that time to really create this dynamic script. And he totally funded this project by himself and really didn't want to turn it over to a studio because he didn't want it ending up on the editing floor. And he really got his dream, and I think he did by far the most superior job, and as you said appropriately, set the foundation to open up for other documentaries, other films having to do with the human drama and our potential. But What the Bleep was the only one so far that actually included scientific data, historical data in it that went along to explain how there are multiple basketballs on the court. Now, which one do you want? Which position do you want to have? And the moment you choose one, all the others disappear. And he really went to a long way to show us that whatever our flaws are, we can start to fall in love with them. And when we fall in love with them, our life of grief and sadness disappears, and a life of joy starts to unfold in front of us in marvelous ways.
No, it was very well done. We're going to get you off the line and recall you because you're getting a little static on the line. We want to be able to hear you clearly. So our producer's going to just hang up and call you back real quick. I think it might have just been one of those things. But, yeah, I mean, there has been a lot of talk about what makes us happy and what causes grief in our lives. And it's really about patterns that we are not objective enough to change by ourselves. So this has been a passion of mine to talk about the type of things that we can reconnect with. And we have the tools. We have the ability to do so much. It's just not something that is there. Are you back?
I'm back.
That's much better. Now, of course, along with this very uplifting and these very keen insights to quantum physics and how they relate to the human physiology, Ramtha has talked about really so many different things, and they touch upon so many different areas. One of them is, surprising enough, politics. Now, didn't Ramtha make some prediction regarding the recent presidential election?
Well, he did, but I did, and I did it on I think it's the ABC affiliate here in Seattle. Before Barack Obama was elected, a few months before, that I predicted that Joe Biden would be vice president. Of course, nobody thought Joe Biden would be vice president and that Barack Obama would be president. And, I mean, that's a prediction that I gave. But the Ram had predicted that before. He just didn't predict Joe Biden. That was my own prediction.
Okay.
But you're correct in Ram's complete grasp of what his students have asked him, from preparing for the days to come, a slow preparation, and understand that everybody can do all of the things that he's advised or not, all the way to politics, all the way to, things that keep me walking the floor at night.
Well, he's done specific things. He talked about sunspots and how the sun was going to be more active in the near future.
I think we sent you a whole list, Rob, of predictions that we've been following over the years.
We'll talk about that specifically for a second.
Okay, the sunspot. Ramtha had been talking about sunspots since the early 90s and endeavoring to explain to people what was going to happen at a certain time in our future, and this is what we have to get ready for. But he had, in April 14, 2007, he talked about that there would be, that the sun was going to go through a huge storm and would be delivering huge coronal mass ejections onto the Earth. And then he goes about explaining what those eruptions are and what would actually happen in those violent explosions on the sun, on the EMFs, what we would be experiencing. And he goes into great detail about what would happen. Basically, it is an electronic Armageddon. It is when you have an EMF explosion, whether you have it from a nuclear blast in the outer atmosphere or you have it from the sun that can actually penetrate our bands that surround our Earth as a protection. It actually fries the entire electrical grid. And moreover, not only does it fry the electrical grid, but we think about everything that we have that's run by computers or electricity, from our cars, from the planes we're flying in, to the boats we're on, to the electric pump that's pumping our water, to the gas, to food production. It's a catastrophic event. And he had been speaking about this all up until this time. And we sent you the one at 2007 where he really goes into details about what's going to happen, and starting that solar activity would begin late September through October and through 2012. And interestingly, Michio Kaku, who, as you're well aware, is our very famous physicist in this country, went on national television endeavoring to warn people on the major networks that science had actually underestimated the damage and the severity of this solar storm that was coming apocalyptically in 2012. And he basically said, I'm here to tell you that we underestimated it. And, by the time he says that, he's freaked out all of the people who are the talking heads, and they don't want to hear any bad news. And he says, well, and he basically says, we have to reinforce our grid, meaning our electrical grid. But, they didn't go the next step and say, well, if that is going to happen, what about people in airplanes? And what about satellites? And how about the space station? All these things that would actually be affected by this enormous solar storm.
Well, let me ask you, is it the fact that the sun is going to produce much larger coronal mass ejections, or is it that the Earth's magnetic field is weakened to the point where it can't protect us?
But even if our Earth's electromagnetic field, our field around the Earth, was at its maximum, couldn't support this, because this is something that has happened in the past to the Earth that have brought on ice ages and violent Earth reactions, like violent crustal movements and volcanoes and things like that. This is something that has happened in our past that is going to happen again. So it hasn't helped that we haven't been more on top of understanding that we have climate change going on and that we're eroding away our protective shield. But this is a solar maximus. This is a very violent storm that could get in other ways. It could be very damaging.
Well, you mentioned Ice Age. Now, there's a specific prediction about London in 2012 being covered in ice. What's that all about?
Rumpa was in London, and he was giving a great talk. He predicted London freeze in 2012, and he said, and I'll send you a runner. Shortly, there will be an unusual ice storm hit the northern latitudes, meaning in London, and in the northern European countries. And 2 weeks after he said that, after he left, there came these freakish ice storms, and you can go back historically and see them for yourself, that hadn't, worse than they've ever recorded. And if you'll recall, London was under ice, Great Britain was under ice, so was Ireland, Scotland, and this was only 2 weeks after he said it would happen. And what he said was, this will come and will give you a runner. It will give you an opportunity to see what it will be like to experience worse than this, and what you would have to do in order to prepare for such an ice sheet. And now Rumpa said that this ice would be coming, but it's not, and he's been saying this, but it's only recently, when you go further into the scientists at NASA that talk about what this solar maximus could actually do beginning later this year and all the way into 2012, and it could lead to new ice ages. It certainly has done that in the past.
Well, we will be monitoring.
Those are some predictions.
Yeah, we'll be monitoring the weather and all of this to see how this thing bears out. But
he also, he has done so many things to warn us, about the financial, horrible worldwide financial calamity that we are undergoing right now, and then also earth changes that are going on. He's predicted, he advised people in the 80s to buy gold, and he said, this is something you buy and you put up and you save it, because one day it will reach 2,000 and beyond. Now, that's actually what he said. He's always said that. Now, he's been on about that, as we know, recently. He also told people way back in the 80s. Now, people would ask him, because people are afraid. They feel something is coming. They're afraid of the future. And so they ask him, and he tells them. And so he said to them, in the days ahead, and because it takes us a long time to change, move away from water, get further inland wherever you're at, buy a piece of land, pay cash for it, build a self-sufficient place, and make sure the land you have has got a lot of water on it.
Well, water's always been kind of dangerous, but
he said it would become more valuable.
Yeah, and it's funny that he talks about gold. He's almost like a financial planner as well, isn't he?
But he's been right, hasn't he?
Gold is going up.
They bought gold at $200 an ounce.
Well, this ram is someone that is very handy to have in your back pocket. I mean, I can imagine you can just go and if you're having a trouble, at the DMV, can you pull Ram out and can he sort out your,
I don't use it for anything like that. I mean, I've learned to create my own reality. I've learned to do that and to trust and to know that I'm creating the future as I want this future. But he's been advising people since the early 80s how to get ready for something that's coming that hits us in multiple ways. And, I'm very proud to say, Rob, that most of his people own their land, so they never went through this mortgage problem that is hitting the country. They put up gold, obviously, when they bought it at $200 an ounce, and it's over $1,700 an ounce right now.
Yeah, well, it's better to be safe than sorry. Well, there's a lot to talk about. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about reptilians, the Anunnaki, and did Jesus have a twin? All of that coming right up. I'm Rob Simone. You're listening to Coast AM. We're back talking with J.Z. Knight. There's so much to get to. I want to jump around your calls in the next hour, and we're going to get into some historical data that Ramtha has talked about and how it could try and rearrange your thoughts about Christianity, about the Anunnaki, about UFOs, and much more. Stay tuned. We're coming right back. We're back talking with J.Z. Knight here on Coast to Coast AM. And, J.Z., there's so much material that has come out. I want to jump around because I know some of it is of interest to Coast audience because they touch on themes that have come up so much. And it's interesting to hear your take on it and Ramtha's take, obviously. One of them, for example, popped up in my notes that has come across in some of the teachings or lectures that Jesus had a twin.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Ramtha simply stated that Jesus he had an identical twin.
A twin brother.
Absolutely. A twin brother. And that we could find evidence of that and went on. And I don't know exactly all the things he said. I will tell you that I've been a part of an expedition working towards the National Geographic special having to do with the area in Rennes-le-Château, France, that if you go into the little church there, you see what you think is Mary and Joseph each holding a child, and they are identical twins. It's a mystery that in this little cathedral in the Languedoc area of France, that each one of them would be holding a baby. Now, that was after I had experienced that and have experienced it several times after he had made the statement a long time ago. But there is a preeminent authority in school, Dr. Michal Ledwith, who was the president of Maynooth University in in Ireland, the great seminary school in Europe, that discovered Ramtha and subsequently left the Catholic Church. He loved this knowledge that the Ram was giving about Jesus and went on his own quest as a historical and religious scholar to find truth to that, and he would be an interesting guest to have on to speak even further about it.
Yeah, I've heard him talk about Ramtha, and let me get this idea out there that he put across. I want to make sure I heard it right, that Ramtha was in a flying saucer at the time of the crucifixion, and it was this UFO that shot a beam into the Holy of Holies that tore the curtain when Jesus actually died on the cross. Is that something that is talked about?
I don't recall that. And maybe that, again, I want you to understand that when Ramp is teaching, I'm not here. And of all these many years, it's something that I wouldn't be aware of, but he would be aware of that for sure.
Well, there's something I'm sure you're aware of, is that he mentions, Ram mentions the Anunnaki, how they were on Earth, 400 million years ago?
No, 455,000 years ago.
Okay. And
that also, and the reason I think that I'm glad you brought that up is that I would really recommend to all of your listeners, Rob, that they watch Ancient Aliens that's put on by the History Channel. This is one of the most magnificent shows that really educate us about the fact that there have been civilizations here before that have had extraordinary technology, and this is a time that the Ram was lived in. So there is so much evidence that there were superior civilizations here way before whatever, if there's a conspiracy behind our history, who knows? But that, in fact, that our history doesn't just go back to cavemen and, bones and in bad food, in caves, that there really was extraordinary civilizations here.
So Ramtha talks about the Anunnaki, and does he talk about reptilians too?
He has mentioned reptilians because there were people who had asked him about that, and in concert with the star system reticuli, and that did people or beings from there have reptilian appearances? And he said yes.
Are they in touch with the human race?
I think they have been. I think there are many levels of beings that have been here and done flybys and have stopped. And, I mean, their presence has been here. And there are some that I believe that have been here, have always been here. And that I believe that several different races have come and been a part of our regenesis. Absolutely.
Now, a lot of the information that Ramtha talks about is what can be considered conspiratorial, couldn't it? And it really talks about the existing and somewhat invisible power structure of the Earth?
Yes.
Could you elaborate?
Well, there's a great book. It's called The Last Waltz of the Tyrant, and it is about the power structure that has been set in place, about the families that basically rule the world and have for a while now, that really they belong to no borders, that they're actually the people who pull the strings. And I think that probably one of the greatest insights is to have witnessed our 2008 and 2009 crash of our markets, and to see what happened to our world banks around the world, and we're still recuperating from that there are beings here, people, and I think that these people are in touch with other intelligences as well, that we sort of live under an illusion that we are one nation, one creed, and there's other nations and other creeds. But, in fact, there is at the base of all of that those who are playing on the chess table, a game with all of our lives. And I think for better or for worse, however they have held our social fabric together, what they permit and don't permit, I definitely do think that they exist. I really do.
Well, you're not alone there. Well, this information, of course, is pretty unsettling. I would give anybody the willies. Years ago, or at any point in time, did you ever feel as though your phones were being tapped, or that there were some forces or entities that were spying on you through your computers or any other technology around you?
Did I feel that personally?
You or the people you were working with, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure. We had a wonderful man who wrote Psychic Warrior, who came and was one of the remote viewers.
Dr. David Morehouse.
Dr. David Morehouse came here and sat down to dinner with me and said, I can't believe I'm sitting next to J.Z. Knight. And I said, why? And he said, because when I was indoctrinated down at Langley, he said, my supervisor opened a drawer, said, "This is your desk," and he pulled out these tapes, and it was you. It was Ramtha, and he said, "I want you to read and listen to all this. It's the truth." And Ramtha had told us way back in, oh, my God, in the 90s that we had been monitored by the CIA for a very long time. We even had embeds. And, you know, for Ramtha, that was fine. And for me, I didn't really have anything to worry about. I knew that if I were in any sort of danger or anything, I'd know about it. I absolutely subscribe to the notion that everybody's monitored. I think one of the most troubling factors that we have that is a blessing and also not so good is our worldwide internet and the fact that everything that we are is being monitored. Everything that we say is being monitored. And I think that's just par for the course. I don't know why that surprises people to think that somehow we have absolute privacy when, you know, we have satellites that can read the year of a dime in your hand that are above top secret. So it's not like we're really free. It's like we're in a bubble. We're a grand experiment. We are, and actually as spirits, we're in this grand experiment. But they cannot control your mind if you realize you have one and you realize you have a choice. They cannot do that. They, whoever they are, cannot do that. It is only when you are kept entertained by social consciousness and always alarmed and always in fear and always fretting over your paycheck and your mortgage and all the things that really do affect our life. When we're always in that constant victimization, we're easily controlled. We are easily threatened. When we learn about our mind, that is one thing they cannot control. They cannot control your mind. They cannot control your spiritual power. And Mr. David Morehouse would tell you that himself.
Yeah, he's someone who I really enjoy interviewing. Well, let's take a minute because here's a question I'm sure everyone would love to.
And I want you to know,
yeah.
I absolutely subscribe to UFOs. I've seen them. I've had experiences with them. They're over this ranch a lot. I'm an intelligent enough person to look out into space in the pictures of the Hubble telescope and cannot possibly imagine that they all run around my little Earth. You know, that there are beings on every kind, every size, every comparable, every caricature out there. I'm not surprised at that at all. I'm not even surprised that we have people from the future that visit us. I mean, that's how open-minded I am.
Well, let's give people an idea of how they can open their minds. If you could, just in a nutshell, impart and distill all of this wisdom and information that's come through Ramtha, what can people listening right now, a simple nugget or a little pearl of wisdom that you can give to them that they can take some steps to dramatically or even at some point change their life?
Well, first, you have to ask the question, do you want to change your life? Are you ready for a future? And if the answer is yes, here is one thing that every one of your listeners should do. Right now, you should write down this little statement. This little statement should say, I have always lived the future now. Just those words. I have always lived the future now. Now, that may sound like a positive affirmation. It isn't. What it is that if you focus on those words and say them slowly, about 3 times, and let them go, you're going to get a jazzed energy feeling in your head. I call it glitter. If you do that a couple of times today, just do that. And then at the end of the day, be aware of how different your day was and perhaps how different you were. The moment that you see that what we are isn't hard to be, it's just been hidden, that once you exact your absolute present focused mind, if you lose track, start all over again and say it slow with determination, you will see how your life will change in one day. Second thing you want to do, I have always been a genius, or I have always been filled with radiant health. I've been 20 years younger, 30 years younger, whatever it is you want. Really, always is the key word, because our brain has stored information on a conscious level that when we bring that out, we actually can begin to create and manipulate that reality that makes that possible. So if they will just do that one little thing today, and then at the end of the day say, I think I am wonderful, you will see the beginning of changes. And the key to doing this every day is add 2 more little statements and just repeat them. The most important thing is you can't use them as a mantra. You have to stay focused on the words. When you do that, you do marvelous things. This school that you came to teaches that knowledge, but shows people how they get these things, how they manifest, how they create. It's not just philosophy. It's an actuality of doing it.
And they got very little to lose to try it, right?
You have nothing to lose except your past.
Yeah, and it's good to put better information in our minds, because our minds are like a repeating loop. So it's better to put a more positive...
Rob, you're right. Our minds are like reading yesterday's emails over and over and over. We're not creating any new thing. Our brain is a computer. Our brain is like a computer. Our spirit has 7 levels of consciousness, 7 levels of dynamic programming that stream through this brain as programs. We just have to click on the right one. As long as we keep living in the box of yesterday, we don't have a future.
There's so much to talk about, and Ramtha has talked about things that have come true, and you have said that he has got a good track record. One of the things that I'm concerned about is that recently he said that you wouldn't live to see your next birthday.
Yeah, I know.
Tell us about that.
Well, let's see, I'm 65 years old. When Ramtha came into my life, I was in my 30s. I have been going to the other side for all these years, and I love where I'm at. I love the lovely people in my life. I love these lovely students all over the world. And there are times that I just want to stay where I'm at. I don't want to come back. And I fluctuate between those 2 realms a lot. And
you have to be careful what you wish for.
But you're preaching to the choir here. I mean, I absolutely know that. And so, I mean, I'm creating a reality that ends my reality. But on the other hand, people say, no, you have to stay because, we have stuff that's coming. And, when I think about this comet Elon and Nibiru and all the things that are out there, I mean, those are the things that keep me walking the floor at night and keep me interested and keep me concerned. But he was right, I didn't want to go on for another year. I keep thinking that my work, my time will be finished and done here. And then I get a bigger menu the next lifetime.
Well, that certainly is a bit of a metaphysical conundrum that you seem to be in there.
Oh, Rob. No, but it's a strange. It isn't. I love life. I think life is our gift, and I think we should love it and appreciate it. It only becomes terrible, if we haven't created anything new. And I think where I'm at, I feel that my work and my time is coming to a close. And I have been steadfast through thick and thin with this for all these years. And I've been to the other side so many times. I've seen things that we'd have to have a 2-day show for me to tell you things that I've witnessed, that I've seen, that I know are coming about ourselves that are marvelous. And sometimes you come back and, I turn on the news and I see the game that's being played, and this is what's going out and being fed into the consciousness of people, and it's very disturbing.
Well, one of the things that struck me as interesting is how the teaching goes on at your school. One of the things that some people talk about quite a bit are these wine ceremonies. What are they?
Oh, wine ceremony. Well, the ram likes wine, and I don't like alcohol of any kind. I mean, I don't like wine. I don't drink wine. I like milk or iced tea or a cup of coffee. Every once in a while, he has one of those, and people bring a little feast, and they have a little wine, and it's a celebratory thing. It's not really a big blowout gas sort of thing. And people, wine, he has always taught it, is one of the greatest things that we can take because the ingredients within wine actually oxygenates the brain. It actually is good for us. It keeps us healthy. Of course, any good thing can be taken to excess, and then it's not so healthy. But he has those from time to time.
Well, are any other of his habits have taken a toll on you, on your body personally?
No. Actually, look pretty good for 65.
Well, thank God he's not a smoker, right?
No, he's not a smoker. He
But
smokes a pipe every once in a while, but he's not a smoker. I mean, I'm not a drinker. I don't have habits like that at all.
Oh, that's fortunate. Because
no, I'm just, I think that the worst habit that I have is that I love helping people, and I love being on call when people need me, and
well,
I do my work.
There's a lot to get to. We're going to have phone calls in the next hour, and I know we've opened up a lot of doors here, but there's still a lot more to open. We're talking with J.Z. Knight about Ramtha and about the information that has been coming through over 30 years. You're listening to Coast AM.